I thought it would be a good idea um, to sort of help people, for those that even see this stuff, even though that I know that it goes into the morphogenetic field structure, okay? Other people will just naturally become aware of it when the information is speeding through the electrons through the morphogenetic field structure, just how it works. Particularly when all their communications technology is being dismantled and destroyed, and the artificial intelligence is losing. What it does, it's very simple. It has access to the field, to the electromagnetic field. We are plugged in, so to speak, because we're electromagnetic, right? And our state of consciousness and our living spirit, which is in the physical matter part, right, is using this as a communication platform. So we're connected, if you will, sort of like a synthesis, which simply means we're a part of the fabric of consciousness. And the consciousness, which represents the fabric of the consciousness that is experiencing itself together, which means we're all in the light, okay? But we have different people that are running at different speeds within all that light. So now we're talking about the difference between the speed of the electrons, which is carrying the information, which is through the salt crystals, because salt is what carries electrons. That's why we're saltwater biology, okay? So the information that we experience, which is basically data processing, the processing of the data is coming through the speed of the electrons delivered through the salt. That's why if you've been injured and you go into an emergency room, they're going to give you normal saline, because they realize that if they don't, the spirit's going to leave the body. Okay? So the communication unit is a data processor. Your state of consciousness is based on the amount of information that you become aware of at any particular moment of time, which means you're accessing data from the field that you become aware of. Because all the information is all the electrons that are delivering that information that you become aware of between past, present, and future possibilities. Okay? So that's called vectoring. Vectoring the data, which is processing the data. So this is one of the reasons why when I told you about all the pop-ups that the artificial intelligence is running essentially your telecommunication systems, doesn't run at the same speed of light as we do because it doesn't have a source connection. Okay? We do. So we're running source light, which runs at a higher speed. That means that we're processing data at a higher rate of speed than it does. So the only way that it can assimilate something, which means map everything that we're experiencing, means it has to run at the same speed at which we do, which means it has to be able to process plasma at the same rate in which we do, and it doesn't. Because it simply doesn't run that much light or is aware of that much light. When you're source light, then everything that is within living light, which is living source light, means all of the data that is held within all possibilities, which means all possibilities that are infinite, because we realize that the cosmos is always in a state of change. That means that the data and the information, which is represented by the electrons in which that information is delivered, is always changing. Okay? So because of that, one of the ways in which we know when we're shifting, if you will, or how it is that we attract, because of the speed of our own Merkaba, to attract more light, okay, which simply means we're getting back more of what it is that we are, because it's like a loop, the spin. Okay, so the magnet, the electromagnetism in our heart, the vortex, is essentially picking up more light at a higher rate of speed. So the faster the spin of your heart wheel, and the faster the spin of your Merkaba, you're growing your light spirit body. Okay, that's why Gaia's light spirit body became as big as it is, because she can process an enormous amount of data in which all that light is held within her light spirit body. Okay? That's what a god and a goddess is. It means that they have collected an enormous amount of data because of how much light they've attracted, in which all that data is held that they're aware of, that they can process. Just like I do, just like other light workers do, those that are aware of what it is they're aware of, okay? And this gets down to the simple thing about reading comprehension. You can actually tell how much light somebody's running by how much information they can hold within a given period of time that they can hold on to and then comprehend what it is you're sharing with them as information. You're lucky if you find somebody, particularly in America, that can hold as much data as you are presenting to them in more than 2 or 3 seconds. That's not very much data, is it? Before the data goes on to the next one. See? So in other words, and this is something that I measured and I observed, which meant that they hold on to just enough information that is held in their memory about what it is that they need to do next in order to carry out the next task. So this is where we get into data-driven task modalities. So when you realize you have infinite creative imagination, it means you're aware of so much light that is your light in which all those infinite possibilities exist. You know that that exists because you have an enormous amount of creative imagination in which you can tell stories that go on forever. That's the artist. That's the creative artist within your own mind that represents what you know is how much light that is out there for everything that you can experience. It goes on forever because you realize those experiences represent infinite creative imagination that is different from the last one that you've experienced. So that becomes your own self-reference for who you are and your ability to be able to do that. So one of the ways in which we sort of know how that works as a measurement of our own, if you want to call it self-knowledge or self-evidence, would be an experience that I'll share with you when I got to the Big Island for the first time. If you went back and looked at my timeline just over the course of, say, the first 6 months I was there, one of the things that I intended on doing, which means this is a conscious intention, was when I began meeting people that I've never met before who come from all over the world. One of my intentions was, because I asked the question of somebody who'd been living on that island, who traveled around a lot of it, therefore basic logic would dictate that this guy probably knows a lot of different places on the island because he's traveled so much of it. Where are there healing or higher frequency energies that we can go to experience? Where are these locations? So this is how I happened to meet somebody on a beach who said, you want to go to Lapahoehoe. So I went to Lapahoehoe. When I went to Lapahoehoe, sure enough, that's when I had the experience I mentioned before, when I began crying for 20 and 30 minutes and couldn't understand where all the pain was coming from, that I was experiencing so much pain and suffering that caused me to cry for such a long period of time. When I looked around me and there wasn't anybody there within this beach park. Little did I know until I walked over to a memorial and realized that in 1946 they had a tsunami that hit that place as a result of a nuclear blast up in the Aleutians that the U.S. military set off, which caused a tsunami to hit the north side of the coast of the Big Island and wiped out a schoolhouse and killed 26 people, of which there were children and teenagers and, of course, teachers. So I was experiencing 1946, okay? I was experiencing information, or I was experiencing living souls that were experiencing enormous pain and suffering in 1946. I was experiencing something in 1946, but I was standing there, if you looked at a calendar, in, when was that? June of 2019. So you could stand there in June of 2019 and experience the pain and suffering that happened, 60 some odd years before that? Or almost, 60, I'll be more 70 years, 1946 to say 2019, whatever years those are. That's how you access events on the event horizon between past, present, and future events. And that's because you're running at a hyper speed, which is hyperdimensional, which means, remember, you cannot create or destroy energy. So that means that we have access to energy which represents experiences that are held within the field that we can experience something that happened in the past, in the future. Right? So as it turned out, about 2 weeks later, I ran into a guy who was from Alaska who was running high frequency energy. And one of the things that he does to help others restore the spin of their heart wheel, which is the spin of their Merkaba, is through what's known as art therapy. And it's one of the reasons he lives up in Alaska, because of such beautiful landscapes. So he helps work with other people that are living basically out in the wilderness, which means they're able to experience the higher frequency scalar energies, particularly when they exist up in Alaska, and being able to experience a beautiful landscape. So one of the ways in which he uses art as therapy to help maintain the higher spin of his Merkaba and helping others to do that. That's a light worker. And he had a friend of his who was with him who was also fifth density, because he handed me a necklace that had a logo of Gaia. Okay? So these aren't coincidences when the higher frequency magnet is going to attract other higher frequency fifth density consciousness beings. We'll find each other because the magnets will find each other. And that's because we are gravitationally attracted, okay, through the other powerful magnets that are running the higher frequency light that they are. And that was my experience on the Big Islands, that I was running into light workers and light warriors all over the place the entire time I was there, because that's how it works. You are attracting more of what you are. So I was attracting and finding through my magnetic compass other beings who run at the same high rate of speed that I do. So you begin to realize when you shift, you are going to begin attracting those that are running 5D. We'll begin finding each other, and we will begin to realize that the next thing you know is we're not experiencing any more 3D or lower speed frequency Merkabas that are running at a slower speed than we are, because we will begin attracting each other. And the attraction in the electromagnetic field, on the grid, on the earth plane, will begin attracting more of what we are together, and those are the ones that will shift together. Okay? Those that are not getting their speed up, which is the importance of doing the inner work of the heart wheel, is going to be the difference between those who are staying and those who are shifting. Because those that are shifting will attract each other. And we will naturally become a part of a new collective consciousness upon which we will all experience 5D at a higher rate of speed. Because that's what it is. It's a speed function. Okay? Which means the electrons are traveling faster, that are powering the light, which increases the speed of the Merkaba. And that allows everybody to be autonomous. Because none of us are held captive by each other. All of us are allowed to be free to express who we are with each other, because we're running at a higher speed together, because none of us are feeding on each other's energy. We are the energy that is, which means all of our waves, the speed at which we're all experiencing who we are, is not held captive by anything. That's the difference between 3D and 5D. You're free, totally free to express yourself, because the energy that you're using to experience who you are is running at such a high speed that the waves are attracting each other, and we are all living in harmony and peace together. Naturally, it just works that way. So in other words, we are finding each other on the grid, and we're shifting it together, because there's more of us here now that are running at that speed. That's why there's a lot of light that is in here that is assisting us, so we are attracting more of what that is and shifting with more of what that is, because we are choosing that, because we are that. So we will naturally attract more of the light that represents what we are, which means all of the beings that are spinning the Merkaba at a higher rate of speed to experience the higher density consciousness from which all that energy is spinning at a higher rate of speed, which means, man, now we're all in the heavenly realms together. We're simply all experiencing the higher speed waves of the electromagnetic energy together that frees us from being held captive to something that's trying to feed on it. That's what's separating. We're separating the difference between the speeds. And that's the nature of the way that it is when you're running high frequency versus low frequency, which means we won't be experiencing any more low frequency energy, that when we're around it, we lose our speed because now we're experiencing their speed. So imagine that you're with everybody else that's running at a high speed, you won't notice any difference. Okay, which means you're consistently running at a high rate of speed in a grid, in that energy field. So that's the good news. That's why this is happening the way that it's happening now. She's shifting us. She's the girl on the planet that is raising the energy. And we are experiencing more of the light that is in here because those beings that had set up and done everything that they had done here. One of the things that they had done was they had flash froze the South Pole, okay, and using fresh water, and fresh water doesn't conduct electrons. So what did that do? That ran the ley lines flat, okay? And then, of course, they changed the vortexes around on the planet in order to suit their own particular energetic needs, which aren't high frequency. So that's why when we came in here, we came into a distorted energy field, okay? When 528 is the law here, which means when we come in here, we're not supposed to experience anything less than what love is, which is a frequency. Which means there isn't anybody doing anything to cause anybody else any harm. And that means anybody any harm. Which means we don't harm the animals, we don't harm anybody because there isn't any need for any energy. This is when you get into replicator technology, this is when you get into manifestation. That means you don't need a political system and all the rest of it. And I realize people are going to have a hard time believing that it's possible that they could experience a heavenly realm that way. And that is only, how do I put it? You know, it's sort of like the old cliche about you're only limited by your own imagination, you know, which is true. Because I realize the kind of stories that are possible to experience in your own mind, because the stories of how beautiful and how powerful the cosmos is to experience and what your imagination can come up with, you're only limited by your imagination on what it is we can experience. And that's true because I've experienced the most powerful creative imagination there is possible to experience because I've experienced that being with a goddess. Anyway, have a great day. Be good to yourselves.